Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to get started. Just a bit of housekeeping. I've been asked to say, do have your headsets on, and if you'd like to increase the volume, I believe there is a volume increaser on the bottom right-hand side of your headset. So welcome to today's session on Innovation Masterclass Skills for Innovation. My name is Joe Torgerson. I'm the Head of Innovation in the Civil Service Strategy Unit in Cabinet Office, and I led the design of last year's One Big Thing innovation-themed and the Innovation Masterclass. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Angela Hansen. Angela, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Angela Hansen. I'm an innovation lead at the OECD Observatory of Public Sector Innovation, and you'll hear a bit more from me in just a moment. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So today we're speaking to you about innovation skills. I'll be kind of kicking off for the first 10, 15 minutes with a background based upon the Innovation Masterclass, drawing upon 3 core skill areas, which I believe have kind of applicability for all civil servants today. Don't worry, I won't be regurgitating the entire course. And then Andrew's going to be giving us a bit of an international perspective from the OECD lens, especially what other countries across the world are doing to drive their public sector innovation skills. So kind of first a quick temp check. Can you raise your hand if you have heard of One Big Thing? Strong, okay. And if you've completed the Innovation Masterclass? Very strong, okay. Well, you'll be very glad to know I won't be redoing the whole course, but I thought might be useful to set the scene and just say, what is One Big Thing? Why did we choose it to be innovation themed? So it started life in 2023 as an initiative backed by the Cabinet Secretary, then Simon Case. He wanted a reform priority to be engaged with all 500,000 civil servants. And in 2023, we chose digital and data. And last year, we chose innovation. Why? Well, we in the Civil Service Strategy Unit have been researching innovation in government for a few years now. And we found that only 43% of civil servants said that they felt confident with the skills and tools to try new things. Now, when you couple that with waning public trust, according to OECD surveys, growing calls for more demonstrable leadership, I think 75% of civil servants who did a data challenge actually said that they wanted leadership to do more to boost innovation. And at the time, the new administration, clearly wanting to drive a startup culture in government, it seemed that the writing was on the wall for our mass upskilling initiative to focus on innovation. So what did we do? We designed a 3-part initiative, a 60-minute e-learning, followed by a period of team conversations to apply the e-learning to your localized contexts, followed by a period of experimentation to test your ideas out and deliver your small changes. Just over 1 month since One Big Thing is finished, 145,000 civil servants completed the full 60 minutes. I think about 200 of you are in this room today, so very well, thank you very much for doing that. 5,000 team conversations were held, and we know between 10 and 20 people attended each conversation, so that's, again, almost 100,000 people applying the learning to their local contexts. And perhaps most importantly, 2,411 case studies of innovations were logged. And I'm sure many more are in train. And that was the most important part. It was important to show that no matter if they were successful, no matter if they were a failure, small changes were being delivered because teams were empowered to get out there and try something new to improve a problem that they spotted. But today I'm going to be focusing on the skills part, the Innovation Masterclass. And I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this graphic. It is, of course, the 8-stage innovation process for taking an idea from inception to implementation. And like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be focusing on 3 specific parts of this course today. Step 1, identifying and defining your problem. Step 6, building a proof of concept, or what we called in the course an MVP. And step 8, evaluating or reflecting upon your innovation. These are the 3 core skills that I see people trying to do every day, and I think perhaps they are the most important. They are the building blocks of the innovation process. Quickly, I want to provide some context. Again, an expert from the masterclass, Dr. Anton Hauss. He is a historian of innovation. I'm sure you'll remember him speaking, and he had a database of 1,500 innovators from between the 16th and 19th century. And he had 3 important stats, which I thought would be useful to share before this presentation. Fewer than 10% of the innovations in his database were new ideas. 33% were improving in areas in which they had absolutely no expertise, and 83% of the innovators knew another innovator before they became one themselves. And so I think there's two takeaways here. The first is innovation doesn't happen in isolation. I'm sure all of you will recognize the fact that in the civil service, to get something done, you have to do it with other people. You have to collaborate. You have to use your networks, your teams, your relationships. Innovation is a team sport. And secondly, it's very rare for innovation to be something completely new. The vast majority of the innovations in Dr. House's research, and of course in One Big Thing, are simply marginal improvements. They're taking a process that you work with day in, day out. They're challenging the status quo. They're asking yourself, how can I do this better? Why aren't we doing this better? There is a simple fix here, and I want to go out and do that. And so I think when we talk about innovation, it's an overused word, I think, and it's important to frame it in this conversation. It is simply doing something that you think is going to deliver value to a process that you think isn't perhaps doing so well at the current point in time. So step one, identifying your problem. I mean, there are two case studies I'm going to quickly draw upon here. The first is Emily Brooke, and I'm sure all of you will remember her from the masterclass. Now, identifying your problem is foundational. Why? Because if you jump straight to your solution, you're risking your idea lacking direction and lacking relevance. So what did Emily do? Well, she wanted to reduce the number of cycling accidents in London, and she thought that cyclists were hard to see for people behind them. And so she wanted to kind of design some brake lights for bikes. An admirable idea. But then she did some user-centered research. She went out there. She was on a bike herself. She did hours of research and interviews. She actually found that the biggest threat to cyclists come from in front of them, not behind them. And so she designed the laser light, which allows a kind of image of the bike to be projected a couple of meters in front of the bike, warning vans and cars of the cyclists behind them. A brilliant innovation. And it demonstrates the importance of framing your problem. Was it that bikes are difficult to see, so they need brake lights? Or is it that bikes are hard to see for those in front of them, not behind? And the second case study is from, again, Tom Hume, whom I'm sure you might remember from the course. He sits on the Google Ventures board. And he recounts a story of an innovator who strapped a GoPro to his head and recorded his experience going through hospital with knee pain. All the way from being seen, being treated, being discharged. And he did two things with that video. First thing was that he analyzed it to identify what the pain point was. There's no better way, perhaps, than to literally see yourself from a patient's perspective. What are the things that are going wrong? What are the things that I can fix? And then secondly, he used it as part of his pitch. And now you can imagine the faces of the senior leadership in the hospital when they see this innovator coming in and telling them, these are all the things that should be improved. And then they see in black and white in color the literal patient's perspective, lying down, seeing all these problems that are going wrong, and they kind of like, wow, this is really true. These assumptions are backed up. Here's identified a pain point that we need to fix. So these different approaches, mapping service journeys, ethnography through interviews, they're both two different ways of empathizing with the user. And we as civil servants need to empathize with our user, the citizen. This is something that the Prime Minister himself is a big advocate of. When he was Deputy Chief Prosecutor, he would go out to frontline staff, clerical staff in their offices and ask them, you work with the user day in, day out. What do you think are the biggest problems? What do you think are some of the solutions? And we should be integrating that into our innovation processes. Gone are the days where, or there never were the days where good innovation happens in, a nice fancy room in an office where a team kind of set their post-it notes out. They identify the problem, they develop solutions, they mock up a proof of concept, and then they test it with the user. And the user comes back and says, well, this wasn't actually the problem I wanted to get solved. Something else needs to be tweaked here. All that work was done in vain. So engage with our citizen, engage with the users very, very early on. But once you've done that, once you've identified your problem statement, you've mocked up some solutions, you've chosen one to take forward, and you've developed your pitch. Now it's time for the fun part. Now it's time to test your idea in reality. And nothing really survives its first encounter with reality intact. And that's not an issue. These periods of rapid experimentation, these prototyping stages, they massively increase the success of an idea in the long term. Thomas Edison, 10,000 light bulb attempts. James Dyson, 5,000 attempts at his Dyson prototype. Resilience is a core skill here. And so you need to ask yourself, what am I trying to learn? And if you find yourself listing lots of problems in your idea, you just pick one. And you ask yourself, what am I going to do to test my solution to that problem? What is low risk, low cost, and is going to demonstrate that this has potential, that it's desirable? We're seeing more and more of this in the civil service today. Labs, spaces, accelerators, DWP Digital, ACE, the Open Innovation Team. Departments are recognizing the importance of these safe spaces. And with the world of AI and digital tools that are now available to us, it has never been easier nor cheaper to use these large language models to mock up a proof of concept, to test your idea. As part of One Big Thing, we actually ran a hackathon with Imperial College London. 10 different government departments came. They all shared their problem statements. And the day started with a kind of teach-in from a learning designer who, within 5 minutes, took an easy-to-use, easy-to-access software and plugged in the Department for Education's problem statement about teacher training attrition and had mocked up a prototype portal for how they could be tracking this process. The team have taken that, they've gone away, they've iterated it, they've built upon it, and now they have this kind of physical manifestation of their idea, which they can pitch to senior leadership, get their buy-in, and then use that for investment. And so the benefits are clear. It's a really quick and easy way to demonstrate your idea has potential. Crucially, you can test it with stakeholders, and crucially, then use that to get your senior leadership buy-in, because we all know that's possibly the only and quickest and best way to get the investment to scale your idea up. Be aware of the pitfalls. AI isn't going to do all the work for you. It is just an averaging engine. Has got an inherent need to please. You do need to kind of socialize it with other people, but it can do a lot of the legwork for you. And if you're worried about sensitivities, if you're worried about this demo not memo approach, if you're worried about getting hauled over the cold stones by your boss for jeopardizing your idea, anonymize the data. Use dummy data. The important thing is just getting to a prototype that you can then pitch and say, this isn't just words on a page. It's an actual idea that has legs. And finally, and perhaps, well, definitely not least importantly, evaluation. It's possibly the least sexiest part of the innovation process. People tend to forget about it. They just skip it and move on. If they fail, they'll just stand up, brush it off, move on to the next success. I think everyone is victim to that. It's human nature. It's loss aversion. Some interesting stats here from the Danish government, shared by OECD colleagues. Four out of 10 public sector innovations are evaluated, most internally. And then of those evaluations, the vast majority were done to gain knowledge that can improve future efforts. Less than 20% were actually looking at the process that you used to get to the idea, and less than 20% were sharing the evaluation. So I think there's a couple of things to reflect on here. When you start an evaluation, what kind of structure can you follow? Well, who are the recipients, and what do they want to know? Once you know that, once you know the data you need to collect, basically, you can then figure out, right, how am I going to tell this story? Do I have the skills to show this story? Do I have the skills to get this data? If I don't, then who can I call upon to help me in this situation? And my kind of suggestion, always in the first place, is, especially for civil servants in the room, get in touch with the evaluation task force. They're a brilliant unit across government with an abundance of learning materials, resources, training that can help you kind of step by step take this process through. And especially when you think about AI, yes, AI can be good in this instance. It can be that kind of first sounding board, providing some challenge. But imagine if you've done your whole innovation process using AI, how do you evaluate that? Again, the evaluation task force, I'm not an expert. The evaluation task force are the experts, and they've got some really good guidance out there, which I strongly encourage you looking at. And my last kind of reflection on this is I touched just now on the need to take it seriously, the need to dedicate space and time to it at the end of the innovation process. I think it goes hand in hand really here with good risk management skills. Good risk management skills is being clear-sighted, clear-eyed on what you're walking into. It's being in full knowledge of the opportunities, the costs, the trade-offs, critically in government, so that you can then justify the decision that you took. But perhaps, most importantly, when we're walking into these situations and the outcome is success or failure, if it's a failure, what went wrong? Who can I share that with so that they won't make the same mistake I did? And if it's a success, how do I scale it? I see so many brilliant pockets of innovation across government, so many pilots, and we're not good enough at scaling or sharing our successes or our failures. And so, I think it should be a call to arms, really, to share your learnings with your networks, with your communities, so that we can get better at learning from failure, but we can also get better at adopting and diffusing the really good innovations, which I'm sure all of you have seen. I'm sure all of you have instances and examples of that can be adopted elsewhere in government. That's it from me. We're going to have time for questions at the end, but time now for Angela.
Thank you, Joe. I'll bring a little bit of the international perspective, and of course we're learning quite a lot from the UK perspective at the OECD. So my work focuses on innovation skills, and I guess before going into what we've learned internationally, I first want to give us a bit of a mascot for this session. So I've been a public servant my entire career. By the way, who is a public servant? Raise show of hands. Okay, great. Excellent. So a mentor of mine told me a metaphor, and it stuck with me my whole career. And she said that public servants are running a marathon in ski boots. So it's as if we're being asked to do some incredible feat, but we don't have the right tools, we don't have the right skills, we don't have the right authorizing environment and the permission to do our jobs. So I give you this mascot for today's session and dedicate this session to the public servants out there. This is someone who has the Guinness World Record for the London Marathon of running a marathon in ski boots. I believe it took something like 5 hours, but still. I've never met people as resilient and dedicated as public servants. So I think there's a lot of damaging narratives at the moment about public servants these days, and this is the kind of counter narrative that I'd like to add before getting started. So at the OECD, we support our 38 member countries, and we also, in the Observatory of Public Sector Innovation, look beyond those members around the world for examples of how governments are innovating to achieve their missions. So we do three things. We uncover what's next, so we look at emerging practice. We turn the new into normal. So we look at what tends to be working across different governments, and then we normalize that through declarations, through tools, playbooks, frameworks, etc. And we provide trusted advice. We are all civil servants ourselves, and we have different expertise in different areas. So we do these three areas of work. And what we notice is that, of course, public sector has always innovated, but with some pitfalls. There tends to be a lot of ad hoc work, a lot of fragmentation in innovation efforts. There's this hero mentality, the individual that's going to solve everything, ignoring what Joe mentioned about the unit of success being the team for innovation. And there's a bit of emphasis on art over science, the kind of brilliant new ideas versus taking those ideas to scale. We're often distracted by shiny objects. I mean, we're seeing that maybe a bit with AI at the moment. And instead asking, what can this enable us to do differently, better, or in a new way? Or what new things can it enable? And really getting to the core instead of being kind of distracted by the tech itself. And then finally, there is often a stifling environment for innovation. Employees don't have, they're running the marathon in ski boots, but that's only 50% of the equation. Innovation is often left to individuals, and they tend to burn out. We see this over and over and over. And one of those counter narratives is about creating the right authorizing environment for them to do their jobs. So it takes both. It takes the right skills and the capability to act, but also the permission to act. And so our focus on skills is really about those two sides of the equation. And I think our mascot would agree with this sentiment. One thing that we find is really important, and Joe mentioned it in the sense of finding the right problem or answering the right problem. It's knowing what is the purpose of innovation. This is a model that we use to help governments interrogate their own portfolio of innovation, the balance of the types of innovation that are going on, and asking, is that for the right innovation purpose? Or do we have the right balance? So you'll see four different types of innovation. All of them are important. One of them is enhancement-oriented innovation, which is about improving, making more efficient existing services and policy. One of them is mission-oriented innovation, which some of you may have heard about this morning, in the panel this morning. This is about achieving big goals, carbon neutrality, etc. Adaptive innovation is responding to changes that have already happened in society. We saw a lot of this during COVID-19. We all changed the way we work. And then anticipatory innovation is about looking ahead, looking at things that we might be faced with in the future, and already taking action with those futures in mind. So not one of these is better than the other, although we do tend to see, because I think it's easier to understand the need and respond directly to citizen demand, to do more of the enhancement-oriented and the adaptive innovation. So that's what we see most in governments. But it's important to define what is the purpose, because these all need different types of innovation skills. So skills are really important. In a 2024 study that we just published, we looked at whether public servants had been given access to innovation skill development and their likelihood to carry out an innovation project in government. So we saw that there was 32% more likelihood to be involved in innovation projects if they had the opportunity to build their skills. So skills are key. Our current work is looking at which are those innovation skills that are needed, how are they built and applied and integrated into civil service management in the public sector, and then why does it matter? So how does an investment in innovation skills end up transforming the work that we do? What are those links? On the which skills are important, we have two publications. One of them is from 2017. It's quite a bit outdated, and we're updating that right now. This is on the core skills for public sector innovation, and you heard quite a few of them, I think, from Joe's example of how to actually carry out innovation projects as a practitioner. We also have a recommendation on public service leadership and capability. So this is really looking at that leadership level. So diving into the 2017 publication, these are the 6 core skills for public sector innovation that we've defined. And you heard, I think, examples of all of these in the case that Joe shared. So this is about iteration, data literacy, being user-centered, having curiosity, storytelling, and insurgency. So I won't go into these in detail, but we're rethinking these at the moment because this has shifted a bit, and we want to make sure we're capturing the latest needs. So it's not only enough for practitioners to have innovation skills, we're also looking at managerial competencies. So creating that permission to act in addition to the capability to act. This is a draft framework that we developed working with a government ministry who really wanted to define these innovation competencies at the middle management level. And these are a bit difficult to measure in some cases, and I won't go into them in detail. One of them is about creating the conditions for planned serendipity. So this is about putting together unexpected mixes of people, building cross-functional teams, and really creating those opportunities for new ideas to emerge. Seeking and integrating alternative knowledge is about asking, how else can we know? It's about demanding that, for example, ethnography be incorporated into the traditional ways of understanding a problem. Asking your staff to go put GoPro cameras on people's heads, for example. Brokering and managing innovation portfolios. This is about having a multitude of different approaches to innovation, having the enhancement-oriented innovation as well as the other types, and looking at the entire picture of the innovations happening, including evaluating them, as Joe mentioned. Stewarding innovation processes. So this is about making sure that there is a process for each type of innovation and that it's being supported and evaluated along the way. And then being a trusted instigator. Oftentimes at middle management level, those middle managers have been brought up in the system and they are less inclined to kind of break it apart and interrogate it. But what we see is that those who use their clout that they've built up and their connections within organizations to fundamentally change the systems and processes that they're working within are very successful at actually driving innovation in providing that good example. It's really hard to measure a lot of these. It's really hard to incentivize a lot of these. We do see some examples. For example, being a trusted instigator. This is an example from Belgium. They have a federal innovation award, and something that they recognize in managers is what's called the First Penguin Award. So this is, penguins you see in nature documentaries. There's a bunch of them on the side of the cliff, and then the first one decides to jump and provide the example for others. This is the kind of sentiment that in Belgium they try to award, incentivize, and recognize. So who are those managers that are going to be the first penguin to try something really maybe radical or non-traditional? So something else we look at is the how. So how are these skills built and applied in government? And there's a number of different strategies that we're looking at the moment. Of course, you just saw or heard from Joe, the UK example, where it's really about going wide, targeting 145,000 staff, and really making sure that there's an understanding of what innovation is, why it's valuable. I won't go into detail on that one. In France, there is a kind of strategy of going deep. So they have a public transformation campus that's about building adaptive pathways for individual civil servants to tailor their innovation skills alongside projects that are across ministries. They provide online courses, and they have a focus on practical toolkits and guides. So they really try to build that really in-depth knowledge, but maybe with fewer civil servants. In Estonia, they're specifically targeting the top. So they have a competency framework for Estonian top civil service. That's about leading organizations, leading relations, leading people. And innovation is not necessarily called out here, but it's baked in, which is baked into the growth mindset and the trust-based leadership. So they're really, really focused on having good leadership, creating that permission for innovation. In Chile, they don't have the kind of top level mandate for innovation, so instead they're being a platform. Being a platform for different bottom-up quality content and providing this to 30,000 civil servants. trained through the School of Public Innovation. They have certificates of participation, and they also conduct an innovation index. So they incentivize bottom-up the need for innovation. In Sweden, there is a focus to professionalize the practice of innovation managers. So there is an innovation management professional job description. There's certification programs. So they're really trying to create a bit of a professional identity around innovation management. So these are some examples. At the moment, we are in the middle of investigating an update to this skills framework that I mentioned, including the managerial level. And these are some preliminary findings. I won't go into them in detail because I want to leave some time for questions. But these are just some preliminary findings. So one of them is that innovation skills need to be dynamic and adaptive. It's not just having one type of skill, but rather a mix of skills. That effective capacity building must go beyond formal trainings. That innovation is a team sport. It's also a contact sport. So these skills need to be applied. It's not just about having the knowledge, but it's about having the practical application and testing them out in the real world. There's still a lot of structural and cultural barriers to taking risks, and that's normal for civil servants. We all operate under the precautionary principle. We want to do no harm, but it's difficult to create that space in everyday work to innovate. So we see this as a necessary thing, and this is a structural thing because as a civil servant, we're supposed to be risk averse in most of our approach to our work, given the stakes of the public sector. There must be these systemic changes and also leadership for innovation from the top to turn the skills into action. So there has to be that authorizing environment. And then it must be clear what the role of innovation is. What it is, why it's important, what's its purpose. Are we anticipating? Are we enhancing? Are we driving toward a mission? What is the overall goal? There has to be a logical link, because otherwise it's innovation for innovation's sake, and that is the easiest thing to cut when it comes down to difficult decisions. So this is what we've learned from our initial research, looking at the latest literature and doing very intensive interviews with our members, including UK. Thanks for your insights on that. So I want to leave a bit of time for questions, but also as the OECD, we never miss an opportunity to get good data. If you'd like to contribute your thoughts on which innovation competencies and skills that you think are important, there's a bit of a survey tool that you can use with this QR code. So I think with that, I'll leave it to Q&A, unless, yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we'll leave that on the screen, and everyone can complete that in their own time if they'd like. And yeah, we're going to go to questions now. So please do raise your hand if you'd like to ask anything based on the topic you've just seen. I think we have one down here, and I'll try to cover both sides of the room.
Hi, hello. Oh, that's weird. I can hear myself in my ears. So my name's Sarah. I'm from DWP, and I'm the Change and Communication Lead in LNN. And my question is for you, Joe, regarding One Big Thing, One Small Change. It was really embraced in our district, and we had some absolutely fantastic ideas that came out. And we are now carrying that on, and the other job centres in the area are adapting those ideas, moving forward with them, which is fantastic. But what is the plan for the civil service with all the ideas that were generated? Because I know that the One Big Thing portal is stopping on the 31st of March, so we won't be able to see those anymore. And we've got so many ideas that were generated on there. Is there a plan to utilise those further? or are we going to be able to access them still and, you know, use them, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, thanks very much for the engagement. I know DWP had fantastic engagement results with One Big Thing. And absolutely. So this question of, what is the legacy going to be, what comes next is really important. We don't want it to be the situation where people no longer feel that they can continue these programs or find the space to experiment now that the One Big Thing window is closed. That is definitely not the case. In terms of, what are we going to do with the 2,400 case studies on the platform? First of all, we're downloading them and providing the cuts of each organization's case studies to the moderator, to the One Big Thing lead, and they're going to be disseminating them to the relevant contacts in the department. The platform itself is doing some analysis of the kind of qualitative side of the studies to kind of identify which areas in the business were these ideas coming from, and perhaps which ones can be scaled. But then at the center, we're also trying to pinpoint what are the top 20, the top 30, top 50 case studies which we think can be adopted in every department. And so there's going to be a huge comms exercise because we want to make sure that these case studies are not lost. They don't go into the ether. And of course, I'm trying to continue the conversation with GDS colleagues about how we make sure that there is this cross-government site where innovation teams in every department can upload their best practice, their case studies. We've seen the value that can provide. And we want to have something we want to have the infrastructure to do that in the long term. So there are conversations going on as to how we build that. I've got a couple of questions on the left-hand side, if that's all right.
Hi, Joe. Again, this is similar to your previous question. So I'm Karen from Home Office. I look after our innovation platform Ideas Lab, which is about allowing employees to share it. And One Big Thing's been great, but I think the one worry, and this might be across departments, is everyone's been really innovative, thinking of things, and now One Big Thing's over. How are we going to continue that empowerment and embracement of continuing to innovate, especially at times when resource is going to start being cut down?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is every department is embracing this in its own perspective. I know Home Office have got the Home Office Awards, and that's an excellent way of celebrating, the initiative. What we're trying to do is help departments to think about how this was just a 4-month initiative, but how do you embrace this into your ongoing continuous improvement, your ongoing corporate strategies in your departments? Because ultimately, this was just an empowerment exercise, and it wasn't the case that we want teams to be empowered just for 4 months. And it should be the case that leadership are going to be taking One Big Thing, taking the legacy of One Big Thing seriously. There's going to be One Big Thing 2025, but the innovation focus for 2024 is not going to be lost. And so we're going to be making kind of all permanent secretaries aware of what happened as a result of your department's involvement. And then how do you make sure that colleagues are empowered to continue that ongoing? Because the risk at the top of our agenda is that this momentum is lost, and so we want to absolutely ensure that that's not the case. Any other questions? One in the middle there, and one there.
Who had their hands up? Apologies.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero's Clean Energy Superpower Mission Challenge and Innovation team. I'd love to know from both of you really what opportunities a mission-led government has for innovation, but what are some of the pitfalls and challenges of taking a mission-led innovation approach as well?
Thank you. And then should we take the second question as well?
Thank you. Hi, my name's Faye Holder-Welch from DWP, Accounting Fraud and Compliance Directorate. I asked a question in the previous session, and this is directed to yourself, Joe. Basically, I'm visually impaired, and the question that I asked was, with regards to the fact that we've got all the AI, AI's being introduced into the civil service and so on and so forth, I did one big thing. I'm a former graphic designer, and I absolutely loved it because it reignited my passion for design and creativity. So my question was, with regards to the fact that we're moving with the times, if any of our roles become defunct, is there a way that we'll be able to sort of put forward a suggestion? If we can think of an idea for a specific role for ourselves, is there a way that we can submit a question and say, this is what I'd like to do, this is the kind of role that I'd like to be working in, how would we be able to go about submitting that idea? Because I attended a conference at Caxton House in central London last year, before the end of the last year, and one of the big chiefs, he said that you can't actually invent a role. It's set in stone. Whatever roles are out there, you have to apply for those. You cannot suggest an idea for a specific role that you'd like to create. So can you tell me, is there a way that we can possibly do that with one big thing? You know, is there some way of being able to introduce a role, and who would we speak to?
Thank you. Angela, do you want to crack on with the mission question? Perhaps?
Sure.
I can come back to Faye.
Yes, love the topic. Part of the work that we do in the OECD is on mission-oriented innovation. We have a mission action lab that's looking at how to turn missions into practice and what are some of those pitfalls. And we're really focused on overcoming some of the main pitfalls. We tend to see a lot of, we call it mission washing. So it's taking what you were doing already and then calling it a mission. When you're not actually changing anything or making any adjustments of where research funding is going or any changes in policy to achieve that mission. So we try to hold governments accountable and also enable them to actually look more systematically at how to actually achieve those aims, because we're talking about whole of government changes, we're talking about whole of society changes, which are incredibly also not only broad but also long-term challenges. Another pitfall is that many missions are connected to political priorities, and political mandates are often, well, by design in many OECD members, short-term. So part of the challenge is to set these missions in motion and to keep the mandate and the ambition at all levels, including the top level, beyond the political cycles that change. Because you're talking about steering very big ship, and maintaining that top level support is quite difficult given changing political priorities. So it's really insisting on those things that are really core. Another pitfall we see is a bit of the go-it-alone approach. Governments trying to take on missions all themselves, and really instead focusing on an ecosystem approach and what role does government play in that ecosystem. Government can be a funder, it can be a regulator, it can be a convener, but what is the role of governments in orchestrating an ecosystem toward a mission? So this is a new kind of skill that requires a kind of new type of organization for achieving these missions. So these are the kind of the areas we focus on with the Mission Action Lab, and building up the capability of new types of capabilities to work in these long-term and systemic ways. But it is quite difficult to keep governments focused on these things over a long period of time. Yeah, maybe you want to take the other.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add to that on that one. Faye, on your question of kind of can one big thing be used to kind of formulate new job opportunities, I think using the premise of what one big thing is all about, if you spot an opportunity or a kind of a potential for enhancement in whether it be your role or in the kind of the broader team, then you should feel empowered, and you should feel that you perhaps don't need to ask for permission that's within your gift to go out there and just demonstrate what that opportunity could look like, how you would capitalize on that opportunity. I can't speak specifically to DWP's approach to how they're going to kind of formalize or take on one big thing structures. But I know that if I was in that position and I spotted an opportunity to, take my role to the next level, or I think that AI is going to offer me the opportunity to enhance the output that I can perform with my role, then I would go ahead and kind of develop a proof of concept, an MVP to show what that would look like, because that helps you kind of engage in an actually quite constructive conversation with your team around what the future of this role looks like. Because I'm sure, as we've heard for the last 2 days, the role of AI and digital is going to impact all of us in quite interesting ways. And for me, it's a question of, if someone's coming to me and saying, I'm really excited by this opportunity, I think we could be doing this with my role, I think we're doing this better, here's an example of how we can do this, and that's fantastic because it gets the ball rolling, and you suddenly have this conversation of, wow, like this isn't just kind of some words on the page, this is a real life physical copy of what this could look like, and it enables that conversation to be taken a lot more seriously and constructively, I think. We've got time for a last kind of round of questions. Let's take two from this side. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Lee Oldfield from the Home Office Business Support Unit in Liverpool. We're quite a blessed team for innovation in that we've sort of hired everyone around the operational department to innovate on operational practices. So my question is sort of twofold. Earlier this morning, Gillian from OECD mentioned trust with the public. It feels like there's a interdepartmental trust issue as well that stifles innovation slightly. If we have to work with DDAT or DCIT, Capgemini, internal other teams, there's often a lack of trust in data sharing. So we do use similar techniques to what you were saying, dummy data, completely obfuscate everything when we're trying to create new tools. Is there an idea for a push for more interdepartmental trust, do you think?
Excellent. I think we had one last question as well on the far side.
Hi there. Thanks very much for a really interesting presentation. My name's Vince. I work in the Cabinet Office's International Comparisons team in the Joint Data and Analysis Centre. So I'm very interested in the kind of international observatory approach in the OECD. And yeah, big thanks to OECD in general. Huge source of data and insight for us, which is great. A big challenge that we have in the work that we do is teams always want to know not just what other countries are doing, which we do a lot of, kind of international practice, I suppose, but they want to know what works. So that international best practice kind of question. And to the point that you made as well, Joe, like, there is a real lack of evaluative data out there that can measure impact. So, I was interested to know from your perspective, Angela, what kind of approaches you take to this challenge of measuring impact internationally to inform your kind of guidelines, best practice, all that sort of stuff. If there's anything that we could learn from that as a team, we'd be very interested to know just how you approach that. Thank you.
Excellent. Just quickly on that first point about interdepartmental data sharing and trust, I think we're going to see more and more and more of this in the next few years. I mean, we're already seeing that through the missions. They are specifically set up in a way to drive cross-departmental collaboration. Like, the governance is being driven in a way to tackle the traditional silos that I'm sure we can all resonate with in this room. And I think the digital center of government has been specifically set up to look at how we are more effective in our data sharing. So I think it's just the beginning. I think the problems that you mention are at the forefront of how they're kind of developing their cross-government strategy. And so I think, continuing to raise that as part of how the digital centre of government operates and communicates with departments like Home Office is going to be key. I think Angela's going to have some useful reflections on kind of how other countries are maybe potentially tackling that similar issue, and on the OECD point in specific. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. And on the trust question, we do see that the biggest driver of trust in government is citizen participation in government. So that is really important to think about as well, just alluding to what Gillian said earlier. On evaluation, this is very underdeveloped for innovation teams, so it's an area of work, and we have a working group at the moment really looking at not only measuring innovation, which is difficult, but also evaluating innovation. And oftentimes the evaluation comes as a kind of a justification for money well spent. And so it's not necessarily looking at the ultimate outcome that was trying to be achieved through the intervention. So what we're looking at is some of these long-term outcome measurements and impact measurements, because we see that a lot of the apparatus in government is really a kind of audit and accounting function of evaluation and measurement instead of looking at those outcomes. And one of the trickiest things is to have a long-term focus in those evaluation measures, because sometimes you don't see the effect right away, sometimes it's an indirect effect, sometimes the more immediate effect might actually be counter to the ultimate outcome just because of how change happens. So this is something that we're specifically looking at, and we should have a publication out later this year based on a working group with a number of OECD members inputting on that. So hopefully we'll have a bit more to say about it, but we know it is a really tricky challenge, measuring and evaluating innovation, indeed.
We are at time now, so just want to say a huge thank you for joining today's session. You have our contact details. Do follow up if you have any further questions. Enjoy the rest of your day at the conference.
Thank you.